Well, joining me right now is Jonathan Gullis. He's a Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North, one of the Red Wall MPs who joined that rebellion of 60 MPs, certainly on two of the key amendments. Jonathan Gullis, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Julie. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. What's the plan today? Because rebellion didn't get your way, the amendments didn't go through. We know there's a lot of negotiation going on behind the scenes with the government. If you don't get the government to make some key changes to this bill, are you and your fellow rebels going to vote down this Rwanda bill?
So first of all, Julia, we have amendments that are yet to still be hopefully adopted by the government, but potentially, if not, we will push them to a vote on the floor of the House. And as you saw demonstrated yesterday, we have significant amount of support for those amendments from the Conservative backbenches. And in fact, as you rightly pointed out, two deputy chairmen resigned from their positions, as well as a parliamentary private secretary, in order to support us, because they believe that whilst we all agree as a Conservative Party that the Rwanda policy is an important deterrent, that the bill does need to be toughened up to stop individual claims going in by the dozen, which will only mean that we end up with people staying here months and years, not days, before we deport them to Rwanda, and making sure that we're very clear that when we voted to take back control in 2016, when people voted to get Brexit done in 2019, that meant taking back control of our laws and our borders and not allowing judges in Strasbourg to overrule the sovereignty of our parliament and its parliamentarians who are democratically elected by the people of this great country. In terms of third reading, which will then be based on what does the bill look like by that stage, I hope if the government accepts our amendments, I can then walk through the I lobby. But I've been very clear that if the bill remains unamended, as it currently is, at the bare minimum, I will personally choose to abstain. But I am also certainly willing to vote against if enough colleagues collectively agree that's the right way to go.
Well, again, we know there are lots of meetings, a big meeting at 5 o'clock yesterday between various members of the Rebellion Alliance, lots of different groups getting together to decide what they were going to do. A lot of people are saying it's going to look a bit silly if you don't vote against it. If you don't get the amendments you want, the bill isn't changed, and you've all stood up saying, look, this bill isn't going to really work without these amendments. If you then went through and voted with the government and voted for the bill as it currently stands, you're basically voting for a measure which you know isn't going to work. I mean, I know we'll say, oh, there's party unity. Party unity around a policy that doesn't work isn't much point, is it? The voters aren't stupid.
Well, Julia, as I just told you, I personally will choose to abstain as the bare minimum if the bill remains unamended, because like you say, I will not march constituents of mine in Stoke-on-Trent, which you all know very well because you're a very sound husband. And you'll also know because of that people over there overwhelmingly voted to take back control of our laws and our borders. The Telegraph poll has shown that 53.5% of my constituents want people detained and deported without a right to appeal immediately. So that shows the strength of feeling. In fact, that's felt nearly across every constituency across the country, as that poll specifically shows. And so I agree that I fear that if we end up third time lucky, well, that's luck. And we shouldn't be working on luck. We should be working on knowing that this is actually going to work. It's all well and good saying this is the toughest piece of legislation ever brought forward. It doesn't mean anything if it doesn't actually stop the votes. And that is why I'm prepared, as I say, to abstain or vote against if necessary, because I personally believe that constituents should not have something brought before them that isn't actually going to deliver the change that they expect and demand the Conservative Party to deliver. Bearing in mind that the alternative is a Labour Party that has no plan at all.
Well, indeed. I mean, how crucial is this issue, though? Because we know that cost of living is really the number one issue for people. What's going on in the NHS, people's own family members themselves waiting long periods for operations and worried they're not going to get healthcare when they need it. But we know that immigration, certainly for Tory voters, a massive, 2019 Tory voters, maybe not Tory voters anymore, a massive big issue. And still, certainly number 3, I think, overall for voters. If you do not, in Rishi Sunak's words, one of his 5 pledges, stop the boats, I mean, you're looking at, as that Telegraph poll showed earlier this week, electoral annihilation. You don't stand a chance in hell of keeping your seat. Most of the Red Wall seats will fall to Labour, possibly with the help of Reform candidates standing in and splitting that vote. Is this I suppose, an existential battle for the Tory party right now for you?
Well, Julia, I think it personally is. And again, you speak with great authority because you understand Stoke-on-Trent so well, right? You know fully well that if we don't deliver both on illegal and legal, which you've rightly been talking about for a very long time, and many other commentary haven't, if we don't crack down on both illegal and legal migration, which we know puts a strain on our NHS, 7 million new GP sign-ups since 2010, all of those being migrants. We know that puts pressure on school places. We know that actually, despite this Treasury orthodoxy that somehow mass migration improves GDP. It never accounts for the dependents that will come over, the children who will need school places, the elderly relatives who may need to use our NHS or social care system. It comes at a huge cost when actually we've got lots of people in this country who, with the right training and the right incentives, could go into those jobs themselves in order to make sure that they fill those vacancies, about 1 million of those, as we know, existing today. We want to get people into work in this country and skilled up so we can truly deliver on levelling up across the nation. So I totally agree with you. If we don't deliver on this important pledge to stop the boats, and it is one of the top 3 issues, I don't deny the NHS and the cost of living, but immigration is always brought up regularly by constituents to me on doorsteps, in town hall meetings that I conduct across the patch. And if we fail on that, and we made a very clear pledge to the people about the start of 2023, the Prime Minister himself made that pledge to stop the boats, then yes, I will be sacked as the Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent North Kids Go and Talk. And I don't want that, because they had 70 years of Labour who had no ambition, no aspiration, and only ruined our area. Whereas I've actually come in and fought and stood up for the values and views of my constituents.
Right. That's the personal pitch there. Here's the thing: a lot of people are saying, well, you know, the Rwanda bill, even if amended, even if you get all your rebel amendments, more coming today, even if, you know, we were allowed to, you know, strike down a European Court of Justice pajama injunction at the last minute and flights were able to take off, you are looking at a few hundred at best. Flights actually, I mean, well, flights, passengers actually taking off and being sent there. Given that people are willing to get on dinghies, pay, you know, 3, 4, 5 grand to people smugglers when they're in a perfectly safe country in France, and to get in the channel, risk their lives, as we saw earlier this week with 5 people dying, and they're willing to make their way to the UK. Do you think they're really going to be deterred by the possibility, tiny as it is, that they will be put on a plane back to Rwanda, and they kind of have to start the journey all over again, but this time from Rwanda? Do you think that is even going to act as a deterrent? Because this is not the same as the Albanian deal, where basically, you know, you arrive here, you're going straight back to Albania. It's not the same as what they did in Australia, where you never touch Australian territory. You literally don't ever make it onto it, end of story. It's not the same thing. It's not going to work if people are actually still able to get across to the country. Only 700 of the 5,000 people who are identified who could go on these Rwanda flights, channel migrants, are even still in contact with the Home Office. They don't know where those people are. Those people have absconded. We'll never see them again, you know, unless they're washing our car in, you know, or turn out to be terrorists, because some of them will, and you know that, and I know that, because that we have seen that statistically. This, even if this policy goes through with every one of your amendments, it's still not going to touch the sides of the problem. So what do we do then?
Look, it's very fair, Julia, the challenges that you posed. And I would remind people that whilst the Rwanda scheme is a scale-up scheme, there's actually no formal cap on the scheme. The idea is that you scale up over time the capacity for Rwanda. But first of all, we need to actually get a flight off to Rwanda to demonstrate we're very serious about delivering this policy. By doing that, we can then strike other deals with other safe third countries, which I've been imploring the government to be working on.
We have more people coming in on an average day, even in late winter and early this year. We have more than there would ever be put on a plane to Rwanda.
So the key thing here, Julia, is that what you're talking about. First of all, we need to improve detention. I totally agree with you. We need more detention facilities. People should be able to abscond. They should arrive here and be detained immediately to make sure that we know who they are, where they are, as best as we can do. Because ultimately, if we allow people just to walk out of hotels, as you say, go into the black market, work illegally, but obviously potentially pose a serious security threat, that is very serious indeed. But if we're getting flights off within days to Rwanda, then there will be capacity to remove people as and when they arrive on these shores. And if we can get other safe third countries to copy our deal, which, by the way, bearing in mind that lots of other countries around Europe are looking to copy this deal, if we can demonstrate it works and it can actually be delivered, then I think we'll have a very effective deterrent effect across Europe, which will therefore make it very clear that if you come to Europe in the first place, and particularly if you come to the United Kingdom, you will not have a right to claim asylum. You will be detained. You will then be deported. And there's no point putting thousands of pounds in the hands of smuggling gangs when you're never going to live more than a couple of days in the United Kingdom. I think that will be a positive step in the right direction.
My guest in the studio is a former NATO and Royal Navy Commander, Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry. I'm sure you will have come across him in your travels as well. He's told us, he's over the last 6 years repeatedly submitted to Number 10 his plan of what he thinks would work in terms of using drones, identifying where people are, declaring in France, we're about to get on boats, declaring a humanitarian disaster. So basically picking these people up, taking them to either cruise ships or even taking them immediately to somewhere, to take them away to Rwanda, never ever touching the shores of this country and providing that as a deterrent. He says there's no political will whatsoever in Number 10 to deal with this. A lot of people are saying, you know what, right now, and we saw in that Telegraph poll earlier this week, you know what, we don't think Labour have a plan. We don't trust them on this issue. They're not really that bothered about either mass legal or mass illegal immigration over the Channel. But you know what, even though the Tories talk a good game, they've not done anything about it. Yes, it's down a few percentage points. You know, well, yeah, fine, but we don't know. It may well go up again. That may be due to the weather more than anything else. And actually, realistically, they don't think the Tories are going to do this job either. Don't you think a lot of voters are actually going to say, hey, why don't you, Jonathan Gullis, why don't you split, you know, leave the party that's not going to do anything? Why don't you think about, say, for instance, joining the Reform UK party, who say they've got a more serious, more practical policy to deal with this issue and perhaps have the will, the actual political will to deal with it. Have you considered that as a possibility?
Absolutely not, Julia. I joined the Conservative Party as an 18-year-old. I signed up on my birthday like some tragic wannabe footballer because I'm such a political nerd, so I'm happy to put that on the record. So I remain loyal to the Conservative Party. I firmly believe in the Conservative Party, and I am on the Conservative wing of the Conservative Party, fighting for Conservative values, as I think you well know. The plan that your guest there, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name, I do apologise, Admiral. You know, I think that plan sounds absolutely plausible, something that we should also be looking to implement and do as well, but have my full backing. And I'm very sorry to hear it's not been taken up by Number 10. And if he sends it to me, I'll certainly make some noise about it here in the House of Commons, because it sounds perfectly plausible to me.
I'll just let Chris Parry just say a really quick word on this. Do you think that the Tories, that, you know, he's a conservative, he says, do you think they have the political will to deal with this issue?
Do you know what? I think Jonathan typifies the sort of backbencher that actually does have the political will. I'm afraid it's at the upper echelons of the party. And as Jonathan said, he's a true Conservative, and he's reflecting, I think, probably what most of the country think about this issue. It's a shame his political superiors don't actually follow his lead.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much, Chris Parry. Thank you very much also, Jonathan Gullis, Conservative MP.